It's time for this week's Economy Matters with Christoph Schumacher. Christoph, thanks for joining us. You're looking at the recent GDP numbers, delving below the headline.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the word was out. We're in a recession again, 3 quarters with negative growth in 1 year. That spells recession. But the point I actually wanted to make is that it's nothing unexpected. The economy was overheating. The Reserve Bank wanted a recession. It needed to cool down the economy, and it did so by raising the OCR, and the expectation is it will stay high. So I don't think there's anything seriously to worry about, that the economy shrunk by 0.1%, because this is actually what we need. And this is very, very different from a recession that we normally see if an unexpected shock happens, that we see asset prices falling, a credit crunch, insolvencies, and the economy turning down.
So 0.1% is the headline, but you're going a little bit deeper looking at the per capita GDP.
Yes, absolutely, because as I said, this slight shrinking of the economy, that's not what worries me, but what worries me that on a per capita basis, we shrunk actually by 0.7%. Why? Because our economic growth is based on population growth. So what is actually happening right now is that we had record numbers of migration, 130,000 people came net to New Zealand. So the population is bigger. Now the economy is shrinking and more people now sharing a smaller economy. And that's what's reflected in the drop of per capita GDP that is much, much bigger than the drop in the economy. So relatively speaking, we are even far worse off than our economy overall.
So we're financially worse off on an individual basis.
Yes, absolutely. And that it's a number that's not often publicized. But I think for New Zealand, this is a very important number. It's not the total GDP, but it's the GDP per capita. How much of this GDP is produced by how many people? We simply divide the total number per capita, and it gives economists an idea of how prosperous we are on an individual level and how productive we are on an individual level.
Will that dial turn when the economy grows again?
Unfortunately, not so. If you look back at the recent past, then even when we are growing, individually, we are not necessarily be better off. Why? Because we require an increase in population to grow. And if that population growth is bigger than the actual GDP growth, then even so the economy is growing, individually, we are not.
But how does New Zealand compare with the rest of the world?
We don't do so well. And we are sitting currently on the 27th spot in the ranking of per capita GDP. You might think, yeah, well, we are not a big economy, but hey, if you look at sort of the top five, they're all economies that are of a similar size to us. Countries like Ireland, Singapore, the Scandinavian countries. And these countries are also geographically not necessarily so much better off than we are. If you see that Norway sits in the top five, then you wonder, hey, geographically and from landscape, they are not that much more advantaged than we are. So why are we sitting so low?
Mm. What's the outlook? The Reserve Bank's not forecasting a technical recession this year. So what does that mean for economic growth?
Yes, and the reason simply is the large immigration numbers from last year. This will filter through by people finding jobs, contributing to the economy, spending money, buying houses, cars, whitewares, and so on. And that will filter through in the coming months. And the expectation is that this will happen now once we get the numbers for Q1 of 2024 and onward, because we had record numbers, and historically our growth is based on population growth. When we are growing as a country, we tend to grow the economy as well. And the expectation is that this is going to happen here.
Has net migration peaked then?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. What we do know is that numbers were on a record high, but the new numbers aren't available. yet, so we'll have to wait until we find out. But I would not necessarily expect a big drop in the numbers. It might slow down since we had a sort of a bottleneck after the COVID crisis, and once that was removed, we've seen more numbers. But there is always an expectation that we have positive net migration numbers in New Zealand.
What might boost that per capita number? Increased productivity by individuals?
Absolutely. Our problem is that we are focusing on industries that sit right at the end of their productivity increases, such as the primary sector, tourism, and so on, where it's not easy to scale up or hardly possible to scale up. What we need to do is find involvement in industries where there are still productivity gains and where we can still grow our productivity numbers. Because absolutely right, unless we increase our productivity, we won't increase our per capita GDP.
Christoph Schumacher, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.